Welcome to Creepypasta. Please like, share and subscribe. This will help us make more content for you. Thank you.
I feel I was shot and killed about 47 years ago. Long story short, was taken to an isolated Georgia woods. I think I was killed by a shotgun blast, but jumped to a different dimension. The story starts with me at the age of 18 and I've recently joined the US Navy. Went through boot camp and progressed to training for my job in Brunswick, Georgia Naval Air Station, where the Navy trained its air traffic controllers. I was a shy boy with few to no friends, staying to myself. When school was almost over, 22 weeks ATC and then 13 weeks of GCRA, a fellow student asked if I'd like to go shooting in the Georgia countryside. Being a young inexperienced kid from the farms of Indiana, I thought, sure, something to do. We went to the base armory where anyone can check out shotguns for hunting. I didn't even know that existed. I knew nothing to say the least. So after that we drove in his car and he was talking about how he and friends would go to their hometown dump to shot rats. He came off as a somewhat violent person whom I'd not really attached to. But I was there and was just looking to use up a boring day off. He drove way out into the country, eventually coming to a field, a two-rut road if you could call it a road, then over planks crossing a tiny ditch. I asked how in the hell he found this place. He really didn't reply. He was becoming quiet and continued to drive. We'd been in an open field area and he stopped at a wooded area. He still hadn't said a word as he unloaded the shotgun, loaded it, and I followed as he went into the woods. He was looking straight ahead, not at me, paced around as I mentioned how dense the wooded area was. At home I'd often been in the woods on hikes but never seen such dense thickets. He still didn't talk. That was around my age of 18, I'm now 65, and it was only a few years ago that I seemed to flash back to the day with the strong sense of realization that he wanted to shoot me, that maybe he did shot me. The exact moment I had the sensation years later, I was looking at him. He was standing staring with the left side of his head towards as if he is in deep concentration, holding the shotgun downward. Once in the woods, the entire episode took barely 5 minutes. Well, as I remember it, at this point in my memory there seems to a fuzzy mental component for me. I remember looking at the side of his head while he was seeming to be thinking, and he said nothing and turned to go back to the car without saying a word. But there is a fuzzy moment where I feel he did shoot me. This is after all these years have passed. But the memory is of me asking why we were leaving so soon without a shot. Following him to the car, and I cannot remember the ride back. In my memory that is how it happened, but now there is a sick feeling at the fuzzy point that he shot and killed me. A feeling I never had until the last few years. I have no proof, no evidence, didn't even bother me as unusual until a few years ago. Why after all those years would this come back and feel so different than when it happened? As I recollect that one moment with he staring off, not looking at me, but at the ground, and I kinda see me looking at him, and this new fuzzy point, it's too eerie.
Comments. That is bizarre. Because the only other explanation would be that you and this weird creepy guy drove for a long time to take a 5-minute walk to nowhere, right? Then you both left? Did you ever Google this guy to see where he is in life, if still alive? He could be in prison for all you know. To me, it does sound like he murdered you, then you switched realities. Perhaps you recently dissolved some subconscious blockages or has an awakening of some sort that triggered you to remember the alternative timeline where you die. For what it's worth, I'm glad you're here, OP.
He had a plan, that I'm certain of, or I feel certain of it. Then he had to make a personal decision. Did he have the courage? Did he somehow feel connected to me on the drive through Georgia? That his original reason, albeit we really didn't know each other and he made assumptions about me that turned out false. I can't remember his name at all. After the episode we never spoke again. I did do a search for news reports of that year, in that town, of an unsolved murder, location in the woods. But that was pre-internet, so maybe it wouldn't be online. If my new thought is real, then yes, I had some sort of awakening, something triggered it. But now I get a chill when thinking about it. Switch in the Matrix? Okay, so major weird event. I've been living in my current place for less than 2 years now. It's a rented room in a shares flat. I only share it with another guy, a friend of mine, and used to share it until 2 weeks ago with his cat as well, who sadly passed away. The thing is, the light switch for my room was located outside my room, next to the door. I remember telling my friend about how annoying it was and how it was weird that there was not another inside the room. Like, Okay, one outside it's acceptable only if you put another inside, but the bathroom and the kitchen work the same way, just light switches outside those rooms, none to be found inside. So as uncomfortable as it felt, it wasn't the only room working like that in the flat. I specifically had to add a couple of lamps inside my room in case I wanted to have light without opening the door, just in case I wanted privacy, you know. So guess who's inside my room, looking at me like if I was an absolute imbecile? Yes. That's right. The light switch. And there is not an extra one, no. The one outside my room next to the door has completely vanished. It's as if it just moved inside. I'm here sitting dumbfounded, starting to doubt my sanity. What if I've been hallucinating for almost 2 years? But it cannot be, because I remember talking explicitly about this with my friend more than once and establishing the whole 2 lamps business because of it. I have no words. Something feels terribly off. Like it didn't frighten me or left me extremely distraught, but just this feeling of low blood pressure, like in the general feeling of everything around my house right now. Have been checking all the switches, and have left and entered the place a couple of times as well. Maybe somehow I've been mistaken all this time, but that sounds just more crazy than a glitch. Would love to know what you think about this. Comments. I believe it. I knew a friend who had a very odd name. I thought it was the coolest because of the visual balance. I even took a picture of his driver's license because it was sweet. 2 weeks later he started a job and sent me a pic of his new ID badge. It was not the same name. I responded with, "Man, they really screwed your name up." Well, I went back to my pic and it was changed. There was no way in hell I would have read it wrong because it was originally balanced and amazing. His name changed. So yeah. I believe your light switch is moved. Your roomie might not even realize if it didn't bother him as much as you.
I lost my diamond ring in California and found it in the basement of my Virginia home, years later. When I was a young teenager, my parents gave me a beautiful white gold ring with 3 diamonds. It was very special to me and I took really good care of it. When I was 16, my parents had divorced. I was struggling in school, socially, and was too much for my mom and her new husband to handle, so they sent me to live with my grandmother in California. My grandmother had lived in this home my entire life. My family had moved around a lot, so my grandma's house was the most consistent home I'd had. My grandma paid a lovely woman named Mary to come and clean the house on Tuesdays, as she had for the last 35 years. Mary had always been close to the family. We called her Aunt Mary growing up. The room I was staying in at my grandma's was a typical guest room. She had decorated it with lighthouses and this garish ceramic vase in a bowl, on my nightstand. I took to keeping my ring in the bowl when I wasn't wearing it, so I wouldn't lose it. One day I had left the ring and the bowl in the room while I went out. It was hot that day and my fingers were swelled and it was too tight to be comfortable. The next day I went to put it back on, as the swelling had gone down, and the ring wasn't in the bowl. I panicked, searched my whole room, searched the bathroom, kitchen, everywhere. It wasn't in the house. I was devastated. Part of me wondered if Mary had accidentally got it caught in a rag while dusting the bowl in my room. I felt terrible for even thinking that, but I had no other idea where it could have gone. Fast forward to about 4 months later. I was too much of a handful for my grandma to keep up with, so I moved back to Virginia to live with my mom, sister and stepdad. The house we lived in had a basement that was full of boxes. All the stuff we had moved to Virginia with when I was a kid, never really got unpacked. The basement had flooded and we had a mouse problem for a little bit. Needless to say, a lot of stuff got ruined. 3 years after I moved back home, I was 19 at the time, my mom, sister and stepdad were cleaning out the basement, finally getting rid of years of ruined stuff. It was gross. We were wearing gloves and masks and it was still gross. In the back corner of the basement, at the bottom of a stack of 4 boxes that hadn't been touched in nearly 10 years, in the very bottom of the last box I found my diamond ring. I held it up and said, "No freaking way," showing it to my mom and sister. They both knew it had gone missing in California. None of us could believe it. We couldn't imagine how it got there. Looking back now, over 10 years since I found it, I still have no idea how it got there. But I still have it, and it's not going anywhere again.
Comments. I had a ring once that I purchased on vacation in Greece. I live in England. It was a unique one-of-a-kind design, and I used to wear it all the time. Then one day I noticed it was just missing from my finger and I had no idea how I could have lost it, since I hadn't even left my house and it had been on my finger earlier that day. I figured it'd show up someplace around the house. 3 weeks later I was walking down the street and I noticed my ring, laying smack bang in the middle of the pavement in front of me, half a mile away from my house. It still confuses me to this day. There's just no explanation of how it got there, and it was so unique it's not like it could have been another one the same that I just happened to come across.
Do you have a creepy story? Please share it with us in the comments and we will post it on the channel. Please subscribe. Thank you.